Hey guys, how you going? Okay, let's get into the Picton pig farm and its connections. Okay, there are many missing women in the Vancouver area, mainly native women. There are over 50 women missing in the area, and it's been going on since the 80s. Okay, victims and witnesses. On March 22nd, 1997, Wendy Lynn was living separately from her family. She was a troubled young lady and had turned to drugs and selling her body to make a living. On this night, a man in a red truck picked her up and offered her $100, double the going rate. When they arrived at his place, she noticed it was very dirty, but she finished her business and was getting ready to leave when he grabbed her hand and started rubbing her hand. He then slapped handcuffs on her. Wendy fought back with everything she had, and they were punching and kicking each other. She'd remembered seeing a knife in the kitchen when she entered the house and kept backing up towards the kitchen until she reached it. She managed to grab it, cutting her hand in the process, and started to slash at him, while still trying to fight him off. She managed to get free of his hold and ran out the door, with him in pursuit. He catches her, gets the knife off her and stabs her in the stomach and chest, before falling to the ground from his own injuries. Wendy gets the knife back off him and runs. She ran to the nearest house and pounded on the door, covered in blood, yelling and screaming. She got no response. She notices headlights and, unsure if it's her attacker, she hides. She then notices the driver is elderly and runs towards the car, knife still in her hand and covered in blood. She was lucky the elderly couple in the car picked her up and took her to the emergency room. She was suffering from multiple stab wounds and loss of blood, and she was in a critical condition and still wearing the handcuffs. Willie Picton turned up at the same hospital with knife wounds and told the hospital that a hitchhiker had tried to stab him. The hospital staff knew something wasn't right, and after finding the key to the handcuffs in his pocket, so they found the keys to the handcuffs of Wendy in Willie's pocket, they called the police. The clothes that they were both wearing that night were collected by police as evidence, and a few days later Picton was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault with a weapon and confinement. He was released on $2,000 bond, and 9 months later all charges were dropped against him. They used her drug use against her, calling her an unreliable witness, pretty much discriminating against her, and then dropping all the charges against him. The victim. Lynn lived with Picton for a while. She kept the house clean in return for a place to stay. She was suspicious after hearing rumours about Picton. She'd heard that he had arms and legs stored on the property. She approached Picton's brother about it, and it broke out into a fight. One night Picton took her for a drive and he got her some drugs. He also picked up another girl to have fun with that night. Later in the night, Lynn thought she'd heard a scream but wasn't sure as she was high. She started to go looking around. She went out to the barn where, after opening the door, she saw a woman hanging from the hook that he used to hang the pigs from. The table underneath had hair sitting on it. He was dismembering the woman, treating her like he did with the pigs. In 1998, he may have already killed 8 women. These women came from poor neighbourhoods. Poverty, homelessness and prostitution, mental illness and addiction play a large role in their lives, most driven to sex work to support themselves. There was an area where children as young as 11 worked the streets. With a lot of these missing women and girls, the police always treated them as people out partying or wanting to disappear. Maybe start a new life elsewhere? The police response a year later was, hindsight is 2020. Picton supplied drugs to people. He was known to smell bad from lack of hygiene and from the farm. And the next person, the witness, was Bill Hiscock, was a worker doing odd jobs at the farm. Knowing that Picton frequented the downtown area where people going missing, he had seen women's clothing, purses and ID in Picton's trailer. He said there was a lot of space on the farm to hide things, that Picton had the right equipment to do it as well. He had a wood chipper. He said that there were many ways to destroy things. In 1999, the police started to surveil Picton. They were willing to stop him if he picked anyone up. They didn't catch him picking anyone up, so while the focus was on Picton, the number of women that disappeared dropped. They stopped the surveillance shortly after, thinking that it was a waste of time or knowing something else. Some police were not happy with this decision. The clothes were tested for DNA and it didn't match the murdered victims. They offered a $100,000 reward for information. In 2002, a tip came in about weapons on the property and the police went in. On the 5th of February, 5 officers went in and arrested him for suspicion of illegal firearms, and a search warrant was issued. During the search, the police found a horse head on his wall, lots of mess, garbage and clothes strewn everywhere, guns in the laundry. One was a revolver with a sex toy on the end of it. It had 5 bullets left and 1 spent cartridge. Women's jewellery, women's purse, pictures of women and ID, a flare gun adapted to take a 12-gauge shotgun shells, restraints, handcuffs and cable ties, sex toys, a box full of kitchen knives of all sizes in a box in the bedroom drawer, videos, books, papers, photo IDs and birth certificates. Inside the slaughterhouse, they found a large hook hanging from the ceiling over a butcher's table. Under this were the remains of what looked like pigs. They also found more women's clothes, shoes, bags and other belongings. He was let go soon after, with police saying that there wasn't enough evidence from the search warrant. They requested a full search of the property. They were given a second warrant. They found more jewellery, bags, shoes and paperwork. In a motorhome on the property, they walked in and found it covered in blood, on the walls, on the floor, on the bed. From the amount of blood they could see, they knew someone had died in that motorhome. Mona Wilson was the victim and the blood belonged to her. She was known in the downtown area. Another victim of abuse as a child, she was also addicted to heroin and sold herself to survive. There were freezers on the property from when the Picton's parents had run the pig farm. 2 5-gallon buckets were found, both contained human heads that had been cut vertically and had the hands placed inside the skull and the feet beneath the skulls. These people had died from gunshot wounds. This could also be connected to a half skull found in a swamp in the general area. It had the same cut as the heads found at the farm. In 2 old chest freezers they found on the farm, the officers found minced meat. They investigated the meat and found ground up human remains mixed with pork mince. Some of this was given to butchers that he supplied, the police officers and other people that partied there. During the search, the police dug up 30 foot underground to try and find any more remains. They found bone fragments, teeth and a partial jaw. This led to more victims. On the 21st of February 2002, Picton was charged with 2 counts of murder and suspected of murdering a further 48 women. During his time, an undercover police officer was placed in the cell with him, where it was claimed that he killed 49 women and wanted to make it an even 50. He told the undercover officer that he got rid of the bodies at a rendering plant, a place where they make oil and fertiliser. It's a place where they convert waste disposal. The rendering plant testified that he often dropped waste off at the plant and sometimes it looked scorched or burnt. Now let's get on to Piggy's Palace. Piggy's Palace was a shed on the farm that was used as a nightclub where Hells Angels and prostitutes would party. The RCMP and members of the Hells Angels were guards for these parties. This club was registered as a charity. The Picton brothers sold alcohol and drugs at the club, pocketing all of the proceeds and profit. They preyed on vulnerable women. These parties would go on for days. This place was like Epstein Island. It was used for blackmail purposes. They had rock bands playing and nefarious activities going on. Women would be ritually murdered, and it was videotaped secretly and used as blackmailing tool. Politicians, celebrities, etc. would go there as a charity event and get compromised. People would be filmed taking an oath to cannibalism. And not only that, they were also just videoed being there, and then that was held over them because people were murdered at that place. Now, links I found. Frank Justra, good friends with Bill Clinton, owned a company called Greek Life Film Production. This company was the controller of the video evidence and distributed these videos to people willing to pay up to $200,000 per movie. These videos included violent rape and snuff movies. He then went on to make a company called Lionsgate. The X-Files was made not far from the pig farm and was made by Lionsgate. Smallville was also made by Lionsgate. Second in charge of NXVIM or Nexium, Alison Mack was the actress recently arrested. The Brothmans also connected to this with donations of millions of dollars. Organised crime? A lady named Carol Taylor, who was Miss Toronto and newsreader among other things, started a company called British Columbia Investment Management Corporation. It's connected to Canada's workplace compensation management. It's bigger than Apple and controls the surplus on compensation, pensions and insurance. These businesses are not supposed to have surplus. It's organised crime and insurance fraud. Carol, while working for the Agricultural Trust and Minister of Finance, changed zoning laws to allow them to sell off parts of the farm, and they made millions off this. This lady retired and married the mayor. She found this company with a woman named Linda Picton, sister to Robert Willie Picton. Linda Picton was an advisor to the Prime Minister's office through the Privy Council. Somehow the Canadian government gave the Picton farm $10 million to help cover legal costs. Linda, Robert and David each received $3,330,000 each, both brothers being in jail at this time. In January 2000 it was closed down and the charity status was removed. Taylor was Miss Toronto 1964 and co-hosted CFTO TV's After 4, a show for teenagers. She later appeared on other CFTO shows including Toronto Today, Topic and her own Carol Taylor show. She and Percy Salzman were the first co-hosts of Canada AM when the show premiered on CTV in 1972. She's also been the host of W5 and Pacific Report. Her career in journalism lasted over 20 years. In her political life, in Vancouver, she served as an independent member of Vancouver City Council from 1986 to 1990. She served as chair of the Vancouver Board of Trade from 2001 to 2002. She was chair of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation from July 16, 2001 until March 14, 2005, when she resigned in order to seek the nomination of the British Columbia Liberal Party in that province's 2005 election. On May 17, 2005, she was elected to Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. In the 2005 election, as the member representing Vancouver, Langara, on June 16, 2005, she was named Minister of Finance. As the Minister of Finance, she signed up 100% of all BC public sector contracts before they were set to expire. Perhaps her most controversial achievement was the introduction of the first carbon tax in North America. On November 30th, 2007, she announced that she would not be running for re-election in the 2009 election. In one of her last acts as Finance Minister, Carol Taylor ended the corporate capital tax on banks. $100 million a year in government revenue. Upon leaving government, Taylor joined the TD Bank Board, where she stands to earn $145,000 to $300,000 per year. She was courted to run for Mayor of Vancouver in the 2008 municipal municipal election. She announced on January 8, 2008 that she would not run. In December 18, 2008, she announced her resignation from the Legislative Assembly after accepting an appointment to a Federal Ministry of Finance advisory panel. Okay, now let's go on to the next bit, which is murder by decree. Memorandum on the organised disappearance, torture, exploitation and murder of women and children on Canada's west coast. A summary from eyewitnesses. Originally posted on February 2nd, 2011 by ITCCS. Synopsis. 1. An organised system of abduction, exploitation, torture and murder of large numbers of women and children appears to exist on Canada's west coast, and is operated and protected in parts by sectors of the RCMP, the Vancouver Police Department, the Judiciary, and members of the British Columbia Government and Federal Government of Canada, including the Canadian military. 2. This system is highly funded and linked to criminal organisations including the Hells Angels, the Hong Kong Triad, and unnamed individual freelance mobsters from Vancouver and the USA. It is funded in part by a massive drug trade, which it is intimately connected. The system is decades old and has been supplied for many years with women and children from Aboriginal reserves and residential schools, with the paid collusion of lawyers, clergy and officials from the Roman Catholic, Anglican and United Church of Canada, along with the state-funded Aboriginal leaders and officials of the Department of Indian Affairs. This system is international in scope, Vancouver being one spoke in a wheel of pedophilia, sex slavery, human organ black markets, snuff films and violent child pornography that has outlets throughout the Pacific Rim world, particularly in China and Thailand. This system relies upon a network of complicity extending to the highest levels of power in Canada and other nations, involving coroners, judges, doctors, clergy, politicians and social workers, as well as the media. It also relies upon a network of body dumping grounds and mass graves, located in remote rural areas on Aboriginal reserves and both Church and Crown land, where human remains are regularly disposed of by RCMP officers. This system is kept in place because of a practice and philosophy of unofficial tolerance and protection by the established police, judicial, military, church and governmental institutions in Canada and elsewhere. The crimes committed by individual officers of the police, churches, court and government against women and children caught in this system are known and tolerated by these institutions. Eyewitnesses' accounts. Eyewitness 1, Caucasian woman, age 49, domiciled in Vancouver at a certain address. Given name of the witness is Annie Parker, who claims to have personal knowledge of the allegations made herein. Statement video recorded on 16th of February 2006 in Vancouver. 1. The witness states that during the spring of 2000, she was severely assaulted by an officer of the RCMP, Bruce Michelson, in her Vancouver home after requesting the RCMP assistance to deal with harassment from her ex-husband. Michelson tortured the witness and compelled her to join what she terms the hooker game, where she learnt the facts alleged herein. 2. The alleged hooker game is a protected system run by Vancouver police and RCMP officers in which prostitutes are arrested, drugged, raped and sometimes filmed as part of violent pornography and snuff movies, in which they are tortured and killed on film. The women killed in this manner are then disposed of at special body dumping sites monitored by the police. 3. The witness claims that there are 2 levels of the hooker game. The simplest level involves arrest, drugging and raping of prostitutes, then releasing them. The witness estimates that at least 1/4 of all Vancouver policemen take part in this level of the hooker game, and that the rest of the police force, as well as the mayor and chief of police, are aware of it. The higher level of the game involves the use of prostitutes in snuff and pornographic films, and in torturing and murdering them. While unaware of the details, the more extreme level of the game, most police know of its existence but do not betray it or its practitioners for fear that their involvement in the lower level of the game will be exposed. Number 4. The witness claims the drug most commonly used on the victims of the hooker game is scopolamine, a hypnotic barbiturate often termed a rape drug, in which the victim is zombified, obeying any command, and then is unable to remember the events for some time. However, memory can return, and the fear of this occurring has prompted Michelson and other participants in the more extreme game to murder the victims and dispose of their bodies. Michelson is the key actor in this body disposal system, according to the witnesses. 5. Soon after the assault of the witnesses by Michelson in the spring of 2000, she was taken by Michelson to one of the locations of the hooker game, a clubhouse for policemen in either the penthouse of the Century Plaza Hotel or in the basement of the Hotel Georgia in downtown Vancouver. Witness claims that this clubhouse hosts a pornographic film studio where women are raped and tortured on film. Michelson is described by the witness as a pimp and drug dealer for all the Vancouver cops and their friends. A lot of the dealing goes on at the clubhouse. Six. Witnesses states that Michelson works out of a North Vancouver RCMP detachment and is on the city drug squad, having access to large volumes of illicit drugs that he sells to policemen and others. 7. At one of the clubhouses described in point number 5, the witness was introduced by Michelson to Willie Picton and Stephen Picton, who ran and continued to run a pornography and snuff film business from Port Coquitlam, alias Piggy's Palace. The witness was subsequently taken by Steve Picton to the Port Coquitlam site, alias Piggy's Palace, on several occasions to engage in sex and drugs. At this site, she witnessed young girls being drugged and raped, including on film, after being brought to the site by RCMP officers. Witnesses described seeing 3 RCMP officers, including Michelson, at Piggy's Palace, engaged in drugs and in raping women. Witness states that 10 of the 12 recently murdered women were last seen in the company of RCMP guys. At number 8, at Piggy's Palace, the witness also met Jean-Guy Bordeaux, whom witnesses claims is the serial killer responsible for the murder of many of the women in the downtown east side of Vancouver over the past 10 years. Witness states that Bordeaux is a close associate of Michelson, obtains women and drugs from him, and relies on Michelson to dispose of his victims after he has raped, tortured, and killed them. Witnesses say that Bordeaux works for a computer... I'm just going to call him Bordeaux. Works for a computer programming company tied to the Canadian military or the federal government, and gives seminars in Ontario and Montreal, where he's domiciled. Witness claims that Bordeaux, like Michelson, is a Freemason. 9. Witness claims that Stephen Picton is the ringleader of the snuff film operation that formerly operated out of Piggy's Palace, and which has now moved to an undisclosed location in Coquitlam. One of Picton's associates operates a front for snuff films out of a company called Goodbye Girls at 999 West Broadway in Vancouver. Witness claims that snuff film victims' bodies are weighed with cement blocks and dumped in Beaver Lake in Stanley Park. 10. Witness claims that a snuff film network in Vancouver involves Michelson, a CBC cameraman named Jerry Dunn, associated with Pogo Productions, a filmmaker named Dave Collins who owns Lionsgate Studios, an underworld enforcer named Larry, a porn star named Tom Taze, and the Picton brothers. Taze worked in a snuff film studio in the basement of a North Vancouver home a few blocks from Michelson's RCMP office. Snuff films sell for up to $250,000 and have eager buyers in Asia, Asian countries and the USA. I'd say they have them all over the world. 11. Witness was told by Michelson that he acts as the main supplier of women and drugs for this snuff film network and for the hooker game, with the assistance of 3 dirty cops, a local policeman named Bob Crisco, and 2 RCMP officers named Dave and Stephen. Both of the latter cops are associated with the Missing Women's Task Force and use this position to prey on and rape, murder street women in Vancouver. 12. Witness claims that both Dave and Stephen are also associated with Bordeaux and have raped and murdered women with him, including Brianne Voth, aged 19, who was abducted, raped and drowned in 2004 in Coquitlam by Bordeaux and Stephen, in association with a prostitute named Stella Malloway. 13. Witness was told by Michelson that either Dave or Stephen owned a cabin that serves as a body dumping site for women killed by them. Bordeaux and others. The cabin is located 10 minutes drive west of Horseshoe Bay on the sea to Sky Highway, in a hunting camp off a dirt road. Bodies are dumped in a metal cistern at this site. 14. Witness claims that Michelson introduced her to Bordeaux in 2002. And he abducted her and drove her to this body dumping site. When Witness began screaming and claiming that others knew she was with him, Bordeaux returned her to Vancouver after raping her. While threatening witnesses not to talk, Bordeaux told her that he and Dave and Stephen murder on average 4 to 6 women every year. After this attack by Bordeaux, Witness began to seek outside help, including by contacting the FBI. See point number 16 below, and as a consequence was nearly killed by Michelson in retaliation. On January 9th of either 2003 or 2004, Michelson broke into the Kitsilano apartment of the witness and broke her ribs, jaw and arm with a baseball bat. Michelson then tied her up, put her in the trunk of his car and drove her to the policeman's clubhouse in the Hotel Georgia basement. Michelson then said to the witness, "Now I'll show you what we do to hookers," and proceeded to torture her with dental instruments, including on her genitalia, branding her cult style with an insignia. Michelson then told the witness, "We own you now," and put her to work as a prostitute and lure to attract other women into the game. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? 16. The witness went to Vancouver General Hospital for treatment after her torture and was treated at the Oak Street Clinic by Dr. Jean McLennan or McLaren. A report of her injuries was filed by this doctor with the Vancouver Police Department that same week. 17. The hooker game receives judicial protection from at least one judge, a Justice Groberman, who prior to being a judge served in the Provincial Attorney General's office under the very man, Ernie Quantz, who organised a judicial cover-up on behalf of several prominent pedophiles during the 1980s. The witness claims seeing other judges and Prime Minister Paul Martin at the policeman's clubhouse in downtown Vancouver during the same evening that Michelson and the Picton brothers were present, and while drugs and prostitutes were being used. Also in attendance that evening were members of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and Canadian military officers. 18. After she was attacked by Bordeaux, the witness phoned the FBI and asked for an investigation of Bordeaux, which occurred in 2005. The FBI investigators were misdirected by Michelson to a false witness who shared the same name as the witness, and as a result the FBI claimed there was no evidence against Bordeaux. VPD Detective Rabinovich, who assisted the FBI, also claimed that Bordeaux could not be found even though he was circulating openly in Vancouver at the same time. One of the FBI investigators told the witnesses, however, that Bordeaux' description matched those of the Green River Killer, a serial rapist and murderer in the USA who is still at large. 19. Witness claims that Michelson provides security for foreign diplomats in Vancouver and film industry stars including Eddie Murphy, to whom Michelson introduced the witness in 2002. Witness claims that Murphy raped and sadistically assaulted her, slicing her skin with a knife and leaving permanent scars on her shoulder and neck. See videotaped interview. Witness states that Murphy was also responsible for the death of 2 women during the years 2002 and 3 in Vancouver, a 21-year-old Asian porn actress and a prostitute, both of whom were provided to Murphy by Michelson and whose bodies were disposed of by the latter after Murphy had tortured and raped them and then overdosed them on drugs. 20. Witness states that she reported the attack on her by Murphy to a Detective Scott with the VPD, along with the claim of Murphy's murder of the 2 women. But when Michelson learned of the complaint, he tortured the witness with a knife, carving her neck and face, see videotaped interview, and threatened to kill her if she pressed charges against Murphy. Witness then withdrew her complaint. Detective Scott subsequently confirmed to the witness that Murphy was responsible for the murders, but they had not enough evidence to prosecute him. 21. Witness believes that Michelson and his associates are hunting prostitutes of intelligence and are engaged in a kind of ethnic cleansing. They target Indians and girls as young as 12 or 13. She believes there's a connection between Michelson's network and the disappearance of Aboriginal women along the Highway of Tears in northern British Columbia. 22. Witness states that she's kept under constant electronic surveillance by Michelson and his associates, and that her apartment keys have been copied by them to allow their regular access. This is standard procedure when it comes to women they've hooked into the game, according to the witness. 23. All of the facts described herein by the witness were related by her in person to Linda Malcolm, a policewoman with the VPD, in January of 2006, as part of the Missing Women's Task Force. No action has been forthcoming. Further background on eyewitness number 1. Annie Parker states that she was raised in North Bay, Ontario, and was used in a child pedophile ring in that city by her father, Len Parker, who was a prominent Freemason and newspaper editor who was associated with the NORAD military base in the same city. Annie Parker says her father raped and tortured her throughout her childhood and was involved in mind control research at the aforementioned NORAD base. He often spoke to her about the so-called marionette syndrome, whereby a subject is rendered into a mentally docile puppet as the result of extreme torture and trauma. He told the witnesses that these experiments were being done on children at the NORAD base by American researchers, and that the local pedophile ring existed to provide test subjects to these researchers, as well as child prostitutes to judges and politicians. The witness also claims that in 1961, when she was 4 years old, she had an Aboriginal girl named Rosemary who was 6. She and an Aboriginal girl named Rosemary who was 6 were abducted and jailed in a farmhouse owned by Freemasons, where they were serially raped. Rosemary had been abducted from the local Indian reserve. During the rapes, Rosemary tried to help the witness escape from the barn and was caught and killed. And then her skull was displayed in the local Freemason hall. The witness feels forever indebted to Rosemary for saving her life and is committed to helping children like her. Eyewitness number 2, Caucasian woman, mid-50s, normally domiciled in Powell River, BC, but presently living in hiding in Alberta. As a former nurse, human resources social worker and child apprehension court worker in the Powell River and Zabalas area, the witness claims to have personal knowledge of the allegations made herein. Statement made during the week 2nd to the 7th of February 2006 by telephone. 1. Witness states that she was recently forced out of the coastal community of Powell River, BC, and had her life threatened because of her first-hand knowledge of the role of local RCMP, church officials and doctors in the murder of local women and children, and in the importation of illegal drugs and armaments from overseas. 2. Witness is a former social and court worker who worked in the Aboriginal community and among youth between 1982 and 2004. She was a member of the Powell River United Church until forced from its congregation by ministers Dave Newell and Cameron Reid after she claimed the local church members were importing drugs and engaging in pedophilia. Note, Reid was one of the two church officials who handed Reverend Kevin Annett his summary dismissal note in 1995 after Annett began to uncover church crimes among native people in Port Alberni. 3. Witness has first-hand knowledge that Dr. Harvey Henderson of the Zabalas Health Clinic is deliberately addicting Aboriginal people to a lethal drug named Oxycontin, a synthetic heroin that induces suicidal behaviour. He's doing so at the behest of officials of the state-funded Newchar North Tribal Council, I hope I said that right, in Port Alberni, BC, in order for the land of his murdered patients to be bought up cheaply by NTC officers. Henderson has himself bought much native land on the Ahousaht Reserve on Flores Island, which he serves as the doctor where he freely distributes the Oxycontin drug. In 2005, all of the suicides amongst the Ahousahts occurred while Henderson was working there. Henderson lives in Saywood, BC, north of Campbell River. In 2004, Witness observed the unloading of drugs and armaments off a Black Sea plane in the Okiova Inlet near Powell River, under the oversight of Bob Paquin, former officer in Quebec Secret Police and convicted pedophile, Tracy Elkins, former officer in the South African Army, and Colin McCormack and Roland Lewis, local businessmen and associates of the Mayor, Coroner and RCMP. Witness claims that these men operate local drug importation with RCMP protection and deal drugs to local youth and Aboriginals. All three are local Freemasons and members of Catholic Knights of Malta, along with Stu Alfgard, a coroner and pedophile. Local coroner and pedophile. 5. Witness claims that similar drug drop-off point is at Bliss Landing Seaport and Helicopter Pad, north of Powell River, where Americans regularly fly in drugs. 6. Witness began to run afoul of the group when in 1986 her local youth group resolved to confront drug use in Powell River schools and found immediate resistance to their efforts from the school administration, churches and social services. Witness then asked parents and local police to support them, which they did. An undercover squad of police began to monitor the activities of aforementioned suspects, but within 1 year, during 1988, all 7 of these undercover policemen died, including head cop Bruce Denniston, and their deaths were all ruled as being caused by cancer by coroner and pedophile drug importer Alfgard. 7. Witness claims that in 2002 a local Anglican minister named Karen died suddenly after speaking out publicly about the role of the local Masonic Lodge in suspected drug dealing and pedophilia. Her fellow activist in this exposure, Foursquare Baptist Church pastor Gord Fralick, quickly moved out of town after Karen's death and relocated to Kelowna. 8. Witness is presently residing in Alberta in fear of her life after being directly threatened and attacked by Tracy Elkins, a former South African Army officer and principal drug dealer in the Powell River area. Witness states that Elkins assaulted her and drugged her son after Witness continued to investigate local drug importing networks. Witness claims that BC politicians and Powell River residents Gordon Wilson and Judy Tayabji were made aware of all these facts and declined to support her or the anti-drug educational work of her youth group. Eyewitness number 3, Aboriginal man in his mid-40s, resident and maintenance worker employed at the Museum Indian Reserve off 51st Avenue on the west side of Vancouver, adjacent to the University of British Columbia. I don't want to read out their names. Number 1, witness is a member of the Musqueam First Nation, I hope I said that one right too, in Vancouver, who has worked as a maintenance worker and labourer on the museum reserve since 1990. He's a confidant and associate of many Musqueam officials and politicians. In this position, witness claims to have first-hand and personal knowledge of the allegations he makes herein. 2. Summary of allegations of witness. The Musqueam Reserve has operated as a mass grave and body dumping site since at least 1989. It is also a centre of illegal drug and armaments importing through the adjoining Celtic shipyards, and is connected to native-run pedophile rings that extend to northern BC and southern Alberta. The Musqueam Band Council leaders, especially the Guerin, Sparrow and Grant John families, are involved in these criminal activities in conjunction with officials of the RCMP, the First Nations Summit and the Federal Government of Canada. The government provides political and judicial protection for these crimes, since the pedophile and body disposal activities by the Picton brothers and others take place at the behest and in the interest of the Government of Canada. The government and police also side with and protect the Sparrow and Guerin families in their efforts to attack and undermine other families at Musqueam in order to seize their land and other effects, even when these methods result in deaths. One of these methods of terrorising other Musqueams, utilised by the Sparrow, Guerin, John clique, is to seize their children and transport them off the reserve, including into pedophile rings connected with the provincial government's Ministry of Children and Families. This clique conducts criminal activities on the Musqueam Reserve, including drug dealing, strong-arming of dissidents or critics, illegally selling salmon and other fish, as well as cigarettes and alcohol, wrongfully evicting band members from their homes, and disentitling them of their land and DIA payments. 3. Witness claims that the Musqueam Reserve has functioned as a body dumping and mass burial site since at least 1989, when he personally observed Willie Picton deposit and bury large garbage bags in a pit directly opposite the Musqueam First Nation office on the reserve. See his statement Exhibit A. Witness claims that he subsequently disinterred the contents of these bags and found numerous bones that upon examination proved to be human, including parts of pelvis, skull and femur. Witness retains samples of these remains in his possession, while other samples, including an adult female humerus, are held at the Simon Fraser University. 4. Corollary evidence of this allegation was provided by the witness in the form of a letter, Exhibit B, by Musqueam Housing Officer A. Glenn Guerin, dated 29th of October 2004, which states that Dave Picton, brother of Willie, was employed by the Musqueam Band under contract for 3 or 4 months during 1989 or 1990 to provide landfill for a street extension. Oh dear God. Are people walking on dead bodies? That's just what I thought as soon as I read to provide landfill for a street extension. Okay. Number 5, witness states that the activities of Willie and Dave Picton on the Musqueam Reserve were fully known and approved by all band councillors at Musqueam, including Wendy Sparrow, aka Wendy Grant John, Federal Department of Indian Affairs official and wife of accused pedophile drug dealer Chief Ed John, who is domiciled at the Musqueam Reserve and owns adjoining Celtic shipyards. 6. Witness reported the activities of the Picton brothers at Musqueam in 2002 to the Vancouver police after the Piggy Palace story was reported in local media. But Ed and Leona Sparrow stopped the subsequent police investigation of the remains deposited at Musqueam by the Pictons after arranging a cover-up with VPD Constable Scott Rollins, badge number 2028, and Officer Jodine Keller. Leona Sparrow was also seen attending parties at the Pictons' pig farm in company of RCMP. Oh, Oh, the tangled webs they weave. 7. The following media were contracted by the witnesses and informed of the remains deposited by the Pictons at Musqueam, but declined from investigating. Mike Clark, City TV, Kelly Ryan, CBC Radio, Gerald Bellett, Vancouver Sun, and Karen Urquhart. The province. Also notified by witnesses was William MacDonald, Office of the Police Complaints Commissioner in Vancouver. 8. After more than 2 years, on November the 3rd, 2004, witness and fellow Musqueam band member Jim Q made a formal complaint to the VPD Complaints Commissioner about the refusal of police to investigate either the burial site at Musqueam or the apparent role of the Pictons in burying the remains. Exhibit C. No response has been received from the VPD at any level. 9. Witness reports seeing Uzi guns and other automatic weapons being unloaded from containers at Celtic Shipyards, 3150 Celtic Avenue, in the summer of 1988, under the supervision of Sparrow, relatives Joe Becker and Wayne Guerin. Becker spoke to witnesses at the time and referred to the importing of drugs through the same shipyard in vessels using false bow fronts. Witness worked as a security guard at Celtic Shipyards between 1995 and 2001 and observed similar unloading of guns and drugs during these years. 10. Witness claims that same Joe Becker works as an enforcer for Musqueam band officials, including the Guerin and Sparrow families, along with Walter Dunstan Campbell, whom witnesses says was arrested with the body of a dead woman in his car trunk, but was quickly released. Campbell also operates protection system for child porn film operation at Carroll and Hastings Streets, which in 2004-5 operated behind the front of a bank. Oh, this is bad. And does this sound like Epstein to you as well? Like some weird... Epstein's not the only one. In fact, he was one of the smaller ones I've heard. Okay, number 11. Witness claims that other Musqueam officials involved in this child porn film operation include Robert Guerin, Andrew Charles, Frank and Jason Malloway, see point number 12 in testimony 1, R.E. Stella Malloway, a non-native drug dealer named De Silva, and Chief Ed John, Charles, John and Campbell, along with Ed Sparrow, were responsible for the gang rape and beating of Marlon Louis, a band member, during 2003 after Louis had discovered a hit list of the Musqueam goon squad headed by Joe Becker and Walter Dunstan Campbell. 12. Becker and Campbell head this enforcement goon squad on Musqueam Reserve that includes former Canucks hockey player Gino Ojic, who owns Musqueam Golf Course Cafe. Witness claims that Ojic attempted to kill him with poison in 2002 after witness went into the VPD with allegation about Picton Brothers' activities at Musqueam. 13. Witness claims that the main security officer for the Musqueam Reserve, ex-Edmonton policeman David Lavalle, is part of this enforcement goon squad. Lavalle left the Edmonton police under a cloud of suspicion concerning his involvement in the rape and disappearance of local women and children. 14. Witness claims that the members of this enforcement goon squad are responsible for the deaths of numerous Musqueam band members, often through staging fake car accidents or executing people with drug overdoses. These deaths occur in order to seize the home and lands of the murdered person and secure the power of the Sparrow Guerin clique. One such murder occurred in 2000 when a young native woman named Ganaji was evicted for not being able to pay her property taxes, which had been wrongfully increased by the Guerin Sparrow clique. She then became homeless on Hastings Street, was addicted to drugs by Campbell, and then overdosed and died. The Sparrow family then received her home and property. 15. Witness claims that Kennedy's property was seized by lawyer Martin Storrow of Blake, Cassels and Graydon law firm in Vancouver, who works closely with the Sparrow clique and their relative chef Ed John. Note, Storrow represented John. Storrow or Sparrow? Storrow? Okay, there's two different Storrow and Sparrow. Note, Storrow represented John in a 2002 BC Supreme Court lawsuit that silenced John's critics and imposed a gag order on any media reporting of the accusations of criminal actions by John. Storrow has a long history of involvement with the Musqueam Band and the Sparrow family, see Exhibit D, and has strong ties with the Federal Liberal Party. Leona Sparrow, who is associated with the Pictons and concealed their activity at Musqueam, see Point 6, has worked for Storrow's law firm. 16. Other lawyers and firms associated with the Sparrow clique and their activities include Lou Harvey and Smith Radcliffe Law Firm. Harvey is an old associate of Storrow and has helped to steal and illegally transfer Musqueam land into the control of Squamish politicians working for the federal government. 17. Witness claims that the Sparrow clique evade federal laws limiting the commercial sale of salmon by Aboriginal people and completely monopolise an illegal black market in fish operating out of the Musqueam Reserve. Wendy Grant John, a former Sparrow, operates her own fish stall, Longhouse Seafoods, in the Dunbar region of Vancouver, which illegally sells sockeye and other salmon. The Enforcement Goon Squad silence banned criticism of these acts. 18. Similarly, in a written statement dated December 26, 2005, the witness claims, for the record, all the elders whom have died, it's Wendy's family, who lives in each and every home that comes from another unexpected death. They, the Sparrow clique, have a group of people monitoring each band member, and so they wait for a window of opportunity to strike. They pick targets in the community and slowly tear them apart, deliberately destroy lives. 19. The witness has drawn 3 separate maps of the Musqueam Reserve that identify the location of 2 major body dumping and burial sites. Exhibit E 1-3. Witness 4, retired Aboriginal man in his late 50s, a band counsellor and member of the Musqueam Band and friends of witness number 3. Given name is Arthur, and he's a direct descendant of the hereditary chiefs of the Musqueam people. He resides on the reserve. His lifelong residence at Musqueam and involvement as a band counsellor gives him personal knowledge of the facts he alleges herein. Initial statement made on videotape during the period 9th of May to June 6, 2005, with additional statements made during the period of 3rd of December to 18th of January 2006 in Vancouver. 1. Witness affirms that all witness number 3 alleges in his statements, adding that he and his extended family are being targeted by the Sparrow clique for their opposition to the crimes described. In particular, witness claims his grandchildren have been deliberately seized by the Ministry of Children and Family officials and sent into foster homes operated by known pedophiles in order to silence the witness and force him into conformity. See Exhibit F. Note, MCF was run by Sparrow relative and Musqueam enforcer Ed John during 2000 to 2001 when he served the provincial government. 2. Witness claims that after the death of his father, Vincent Stogan, the hereditary chief of the Musqueam in 2000, attacks against he and his family were made by the Sparrow clique on the reserve, especially after the witness began to speak out against the clique's corrupt and nepotistic practices. These attacks culminated in February of 2004 when all 14 of the witnesses' grandchildren were seized by, I can't even read that, the Child Protection Society of the Stolo First Nation near Chilliwack. Witness was denied any visiting rights, even though one of his granddaughters was placed in the home of a convicted pedophile by this worker Loretta Rosa, who also falsified reports and made false claims about the children. Rosa is associated with Wendy Grant John Sparrow through the Sumas First Nation. Both the Chilliwack and the Mission detachments of the RCMP refused to investigate complaints by the witness regarding these actions. Exhibit F. 3. Witness states that another reason for this attack on he and his family, in his discovery of evidence that the present Sparrow clique and their relatives cooperated with the federal government in destroying traditional records and histories of the Musqueam and Coast Salish people during the 1970s as part of the effort to ethnically cleanse West Coast Aboriginal people and steal their land. A letter from the Department of Indian Affairs dated September 22, 1972, states that individual records of native people in BC were to be destroyed under the scrutiny of Chief Clarence Joe, a Sparrow relative. See Exhibit G. These records included evidence of original land ownership and genealogy. 4. Witness states that there is a direct link between criminal and pedophile networks involving Aboriginal politicians in both Musqueam and Cowichan nations because of traditional kinship ties across the Georgia Strait. Witness claims that Joe Becker, Delbert Guerin and Andrew Charles are linked to Cowichan's chiefs who are heavily involved in the drug trade, illegal fishing and pedophile rings operating out of Nanaimo, centred around the Harris family of the Chimanias First Nation. I really apologise if I am butchering these names. I really do apologise. 5. In December of 2005, the witness compiled these allegations into a letter to Amnesty International and sent with this letter forensic samples of the alleged human remains unearthed by witness number 3 at the Musqueam burial site visited by the Pictons. This letter and package were returned to the witness unopened. Both witness and witness number 3 live in daily fear for their lives. Witness 5, an Aboriginal man named age 55 who is traditionally hereditary chief to the Chimanias Nation in Oyster Bay, BC on Vancouver Island. Given name is Stephen Sampson Jr. resides on his traditional family land near Shell Beach. He's lived all his life in proximity with the people described in his statement, and as a traditional chief and former activist in the American Indian movement and the Red Power movement, he has direct and personal knowledge of the facts alleged herein. Statement made during the period 3rd to 19th of June 2005 in Shell Beach. 1. Witness claims that the present leadership of the Chimanias First Nation is deeply involved in illegal activity and are responsible for murders on the local reserves. This leadership involves around George Harris and George Ed and Peter Seymour, whom witnesses claim operate the local drug and child trafficking and child porn networks in conjunction with Nanaimo criminal Willie Curry. Curry operates a local equivalent of the Picton Pig Farm in a house on Jingle Pot Road in Nanaimo, where he has raped and murdered numerous young girls, including Lisa Marie de Jong, in 2004. 2. Witness states that George Harris is closely connected to the Guerin Sparrow clique in Musqueam and engages in illegal fishing and drug importation practices with them across Georgia Strait. The parents of Harris, Irene and Lawrence Harris, were Catholic church-sponsored watchmen who transported children into the Cooper Island Residential School during the 1940s and 50s, and who were descended from collaborating puppet chiefs set up by Catholic missionaries in the 19th century. 3. Witness claims that the Harris clique have tried to force him and his family off their land for years through physical intimidation, murder, poisoning their water, and attempting to kill off the Sampson bloodline through involuntary sterilisation inflicted on both of the witnesses' sons, Troy and Steve. Witness number 6. Aboriginal woman in her mid-50s, given name as Bernice. Native name Skundal of... I can't say that. I'm so sorry. Member of the Downtown Eastside Women's Centre in Vancouver, and an activist since the 1970s with Native women's groups across BC. Statement made on April 3rd and April 28th, 2006 in Vancouver, BC. Number 1. Witness claims that Vancouver police officer named Dave Dixon is responsible for the rape and murder of numerous Aboriginal women in the downtown east side. Dixon holds a senior position of responsibility in the Missing Women's Task Force and is very prominent in the downtown east side of Vancouver, serving on community liaison boards. 2002. Witness claims that she has been attacked on several occasions by policemen and women associated with Dixon because of her investigation into the missing women. In February 2006, Witness was attacked without warning by 5 policemen in an alley of the 200 block East Hastings, was struck in the head, pepper sprayed and handcuffed, and was being forced into a police van for a midnight ride, during which she expected to be killed. Witness screamed for help, and a local resident saw the attack and raised a furor, at which point the police let the witness go. 3. Witness confirms as the statements of witness number 1, Annie Parker, concerning the identity of Bruce Michelson and other police connected to the disappearance, torture, rape and murder of women in Vancouver. 4. Witness claims the disappearance of Vancouver Aboriginal women, as part of the aforementioned hooker game, is directly connected to the murder of women in northern BC along the so-called Highway of Tears, and is being actively covered up by government, judges and police in BC. 5. Witness claims that she and her associates at the Downtown Eastside Women's Centre face continual harassment by the police and by former DEWC senior staff, some of whom actively resisted their efforts to expose the murders of Aboriginal women in Vancouver. Witness claims that these staff and others are aware of the identity of these murderers and are working with city police and others to conceal their identity. I, Kevin Daniel Annette of Do solemnly declare and swear that these statements and facts alleged herein were shared with me by each of the persons named as witness in this memorandum and were recorded by me on video camera on the dates given. And that is the end. Let me know what you think. Does this sounds like another Epstein situation? And if this is going to be worldwide, we already know this. But I had a funny feeling the Highway of Tears was somehow connected, if not to the pig farm, to the people who associate with it. And it's really, really sad. My heart goes out to all these people who are victims of this type of thing. Anyway, guys, you let me know what you think down below. I look forward to reading your comments, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye guys.